Carmen, wrapped in a thick, faux fur coat, watched as the campfire offered faint light on the windless desert. It was a much-needed respite from the relentless wind that had plagued her throughout the day's journey. Never before had she felt such torment and vulnerability. She had just begun her trek across no man's land, and already she wanted to turn back, even though she knew there was nowhere to return to. She had put everything on the line, selling all her possessions, and that gamble had already betrayed her many times over. She had been robbed of her imperial coins several times, drastically depleting her financial resources. Twice she was attacked and had to spend a week in a hospital on the outskirts of the civilized world she knew. Yes, this journey had been an ordeal from the very beginning. But now she had different worries. She tried to piece together the events that had led her to the brink of exhaustion. She vaguely remembered a well-built man with a cruel, icy gaze visiting her in the evening and, with the help of his companions, breaking her nose. Then she was forcibly dragged from her small hotel room, only to be saved by a man about whom she knew nothing. Everything had happened so quickly, so intensely, that it was impossible to fill in the black gaps in her memory. She didn't even recall how she managed to escape the town. For the first few hours she sat in her cart, being pulled by her mysterious savior. She observed the half-buried machines in the sand, remnants of people who had tried to conquer nature. She saw the first graves. She heard the flapping of flags as black as night, marking a respectful distance from Assyria. She read the runes inscribed in white chalk on the wind-beaten fabrics, meant to ward off evil demons. But as she had learned, no magic, no technology, was enough to conquer the great desert.
Since I was a child, I always wondered why people didn't lay tracks and send steel beasts across.
She recalled a brief conversation she had with the stranger 2 hours into their escape. It was then that she first saw a locomotive, half swallowed by the sand.
It's not that simple.
The man had replied, pulling the heavy wooden cart with all his strength.
The Great Desert is characterized by a hard, cracked surface, but that ground has its secrets. Beneath this sun-scorched layer lie shifting sands, a mere few kilograms above the accepted limit, and the surface opens up like the jaws of a great beast. Many people lost their lives thinking they had found a way to traverse it with steel and steam.
It seems the gods don't want us to cross this desert.
I wouldn't go that far in your conclusions.
Why not? Don't you believe that gods once existed in this world?
Does it change anything in our lives if we find the answer? If the gods truly existed, they left these lands a long time ago for reasons unknown to me. Maybe they died. Maybe they abandoned us. And if they never existed, it changes nothing either. What matters is the here and now, and right now, they're gone.
What do you mean by that?
We're alone in this world and nothing will change that. I'll say it again. Only the here and now matters. The past should be buried, just like those massive steel machines in the desert that we passed by.
My father always said that the past shapes us, just as a seed is shaped by the soil around it.
Carmen said, for whom history, even those events that happened before her birth, was important for the modern world.
When the seed rises from the ground, it begins to shape the soil around it. Trees lift the dry ground, giving it new forms.
The wanderer replied. Carmen didn't continue the conversation, as the nameless one's words had caused a bit of turmoil in her worldview. She needed time to digest them, much like a stomach digests food, and that's a lengthy process. After some time, she got off the cart and took over the man's role, allowing him to rest for a while as they walked side by side. Heading directly west, they saw red stretching in every direction, as if they were standing on an endless, crimson sea of emptiness. The feeling of loneliness was intensified by the gray, dirty sky and the pale sun that beat down from morning until the end of the day. But as the star went to sleep, the cold stretched its limbs and announced its reign with a gusty, chilling wind and white dew that froze, forming a thin layer of ice. It was that first night that made the woman doubt her expedition. Yes, She had seen snow in her life when winter occasionally visited the capital of the empire, but it could not compare to the low temperatures of the desert, as if death itself were breathing on her exposed skin. Shivering from the cold and exhaustion, Carmen didn't notice when her new companion approached her from behind and unexpectedly sat down beside her. He settled comfortably on a seat covered with thick fur and handed her a large cup of hot broth.
Thank you.
She said with genuine gratitude.
Thank you for saving me from those thugs. I feel foolish, but I've just realized I never thanked you for rescuing me.
It's nothing.
He replied shortly and curtly.
Why did you do it? Why did you stand up to them?
Does the reason matter? I've always thought that motivations are overrated. Only the outcome of our actions matters. And in this case, the result is that I saved you.
For me, the reason always matters, especially since it forced you to leave Assyria.
I was going to leave anyway. I decided to do it with a bang.
Carmen frowned, disappointed by the sarcastic response. The man quickly caught on to her reaction and added more seriously after a moment.
If you really want to know, I don't know why I did it. All I know is that if I hadn't, you wouldn't have survived many days at Jaeger's farm. No one ever returns from there.
He sighed deeply.
But I was partly telling the truth. I was planning to set off on another journey soon.
Another one?
Carmen asked, listening intently to her companion while holding the warm metal cup closer.
Many adventurers who come to Assyria to conquer the Great Desert stay there for the rest of their lives. But you could say I'm a traveler. I have no place in this world. Maybe one day I'll find it, or maybe I won't. For me, it doesn't matter much.
I'm all the more grateful that you didn't leave earlier. Once again, thank you, Mr.
Call me whatever you want.
You won't tell me your name?
I don't have one.
Everyone has a name.
Carmen protested.
That's true, everyone has a name. I once had one too, but I've long since forgotten it.
Surprised by his words, Carmen moved a bit closer to look him directly in the eyes and make sure he wasn't joking. After a moment of staring into his gaze, fixed on the dancing flames of the campfire, she came to a startling realization. He wasn't joking.
For as long as I can remember, I've roamed the world, moving from town to town. I never trusted the locals, so I never revealed my name to them. It was simpler and safer that way. Throughout years of wandering through countless lands, I never had the chance to speak my name even once. And one day, I don't know when exactly, I woke up and discovered that I had forgotten my name. Since then, I've been the nameless one.
That's sad.
The woman remarked.
Why?
The man asked, puzzled.
You don't know who you are.
I know who I am. A name doesn't define that. It's our actions that create the epic of our humanity. As I said, you can consider me a traveler. But who are you? What is the real reason for your journey?
Carmen finished her meal, which was neither nourishing nor tasty. However, it was hot enough to warm her chilled body. For a moment, she held the metal container in her hands, drawing out the last bits of warmth, while gazing into the distance with a blank expression, as if trying to spot something in the west. Only after a while was she ready to answer that seemingly simple question. Who are you? Indeed, who was this red-haired beauty with a broken nose, bandaged by the nameless one?
My name is Carmen Phoenix.
She said in a sorrowful voice.
You're the daughter of that phoenix?
Yes, Adam Phoenix was my father. I'm surprised you know his name.
Don't forget, I'm a wanderer. I've been to the capital twice. It was hard not to hear about the archaeologist, explorer, and preacher. He was probably one of the last sages who believed in the old faith of the gods.
He was.
Carmen corrected him.
He was one of the last sages. It's because of him that I set out on this journey. 5 years ago, along with his faithful followers, he left the capital to cross the Great Desert. He was certain he would surpass the 14-day barrier and discover the Valley of Greenery. He wanted to prove to everyone that he was right. He wanted people to believe in the goodness of the gods once more.
I assume he never returned.
Yes, that's true. He didn't return from that expedition. Initially, I set out to find his body. After all, I'm not naive. I know he died on that cursed land.
I don't mean to be rude, but don't you think that's foolish?
I know that now. I've often asked myself how one could find a body in this desert, which stretches endlessly in nearly every direction. That's why I began studying his notes, which he left for me. I mapped out the plan and the route he might have taken. I checked his calculations, ideas, and assumptions, and eventually, I stumbled upon something that pushed me into action.
What did you discover?
My father, like everyone else who embarked on this dangerous journey, believed that all it took was 14 days of travel to cross the Great Desert. I discovered, and I checked my calculations many times, that the barrier one must cross isn't after 14 days, but after 3 weeks of arduous trekking. Moreover, judging by travelers' descriptions and my calculations, I'm almost certain that the desert is actually a high plateau, tilted upward from the western side.
So you think this endless desert is an illusion?
Yes, I believe the valley everyone is searching for is truly a valley lying in the shadow of a great plateau. That's why, no matter how far one goes, they won't see the end of their journey until they reach the real goal.
A bold hypothesis, and I sense there's a little twist in all this.
What do you mean?
Your motivation. You said that at first you intended to find your father's body, but that's not true. At least not anymore. Your motivation changed after you started this journey. Am I wrong?
I'm not that naive. To be honest, it was just an excuse. I always knew I wouldn't be able to find a body that had probably decomposed and become part of this damn sand by now. Instead, I want to prove to the world that Adam Phoenix was right. The gods truly existed, just as the forgotten Green Valley exists, where crystal clear water flows through countless rivers. That's my goal and duty.
The man noticed that the campfire was starting to die out, so he threw a few more pieces of deadwood he had gathered along the way. He smiled faintly and patted Carmen on the shoulder.
Then I wish you good luck.
You're not coming with me?
Unlike you, I'm not looking for anything in this desert. I know what's out here. Only death and oblivion. I intend to accompany you to the 7-day mark and then veer off to the southeast, avoiding Assyria. Maybe by then, I'll convince you to abandon this madness. Believe me, no one will conquer this crimson land.
I'm sorry, but I can't give up. Even if I feel doubts wriggling under my skin like worms, I simply can't.
More like you just don't want to.
And I won't give up.
Those were the last words they exchanged that night. Exhausted as never before, Carmen took the furs and crawled under the cart to protect herself from the biting cold wind. She covered herself tightly, cutting herself off from the outside world. She was frozen, worn out, in pain, but at the same time, determined. The nameless one sat on the hard ground for a while longer, watching the flames flicker in the wind. On one hand, he thought Carmen was naive and a bit foolish, just as he had remembered her when he first saw her in the saloon in Assyria. Yet he also felt respect for her, for despite all the hardships, she hadn't given up. She was full of optimism, unlike him. He justified this to himself, knowing what awaited them in the days to come. And that was what he feared the most, the wrath of the great desert.